Hello, everybody. It is Richard here, and I'm joined by
By Jenny.
and this is once again Fish Flip Podcast, and we're back today again to talk about our new topic, only child, or as Jenny would like to put it,
Well, we started out by wondering about only child syndrome,
right?
but after that was quickly debunked. We switched to only children.
Yeah,
We are both only children.
yeah, and I think what better topic to talk about, right? Than
Something we can both relate to on a first-hand basis.
That's right. That's right. So, I guess today we're looking at, what is it? The conditions of when only childs are brought up, and perhaps like how this kind of stuff affects their life, and maybe just like the personality and perspective of an only child versus the stereotypes
Yes.
that the society has typically
Yeah.
for these kind of
I think it's easy to
people.
stereotype only children. It's as easy as it is to blame them because there's no one else to defend them.
Yeah.
And I think it will become more and more relevant as people have fewer and fewer children. So it's interesting to dig into our experiences of what
Yeah.
it's like compared to what the internet tells us it should have been like.
Yeah, I do recall reading recently that, like you're saying, only children, like families, are becoming more and more prevalent as they're like having less and less kids, I suppose, right? And this tends to be like the pattern as well for like as all the countries around the world become more developed, people are having less kids, so these kind of like situations are probably more and more common, right?
Even in China, they changed the policy to a two-child policy now, as far as I'm aware, and it's not working like magic. People aren't having two kids. It's expensive.
Yeah.
And it's a modernized country, so parents are busy, they're working, career is coming first, their own aspirations are coming first, like in other developed nations.
Yeah, exactly. There's more of a sense of personal development. Rather than what the case was back then, where people were just trying to get out of poverty. So it was all about getting more children, more offspring, so that they could have more of a family income, like a generational income, after the fact. So
if you had an only child at that time, then of course there would be this stereotype of the child being weird and unsocialized because you probably were stuck in the middle of rural nowhere.
Not the norm, right?
Just with your parents.
Yeah, exactly. So, we also figured we'd crack a couple beers to start us off today.
Yes.
Although we've already gone through some beers, unfortunately, before we were able to start. It just had a good work day. Now, I guess let's maybe start out with my first question. What do you feel about being an only child, having all the attention from your family?
All the attention from your family. I honestly feel like being an only child is also the equivalent to being the eldest child in regards to attention from your parents. They probably coddle you a bit more when you're a baby. They extra make sure that you're not going to die because you're the only one. Right. And in some ways it can inhibit your growth a little bit, your personal growth, because there are these kind of boundaries of safety always hovering around you. And I'm just so grateful I grew up before cell phones were a thing, because I know that if I was a child with a cell phone, my mom would always be texting me like, where are you? What are you doing now? Remember, come home at 7 p.m.
Yeah,
There's a bit more freedom in the 90s.
Yeah. And if you were in a family with multiple siblings, I'm sure like your family is still like concerned about like your well-being too, but perhaps there's just so much more of that attention being given when you're out there. And I'm just kind of saying this from my own personal experience as well, right? Getting phone calls every time I go out where I feel like I literally had to kind of like slowly teach my parents that, you can leave me alone and I'll come back just fine later on.
Yeah.
And I'm knowledgeable enough and I've learned enough, on my own, and that I can take care of myself, and I am also the type to like want to be more independent at the same time because I'm an only child, right? Yeah, I mean, if it's the way that you've been raised, in I guess in solitude, if you will, in terms of being a kid, then I would like to bet that maybe you're more prone or inclined to be needing some kind of like alone time, right? You need your own space, and that may include like going out to see some friends, and that maybe you finding your own space as well.
Your own space, because eventually your parents' attention is going to finally shift off of you.
Yeah.
And then there's no siblings there to give you attention or to exchange attention with. So you become used to, and then as you grow up, you start to value having alone time, which I actually read on one website that only children are independent to a fault.
Yes.
Meaning they must have their alone time, and it's my way or it's no way, because they're so comfortable being by themselves that it really doesn't matter. If there's a clincher in a relationship, it's like, I'm not going to bend over backwards for you because I'm okay by myself. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I do agree with that. I mean, I guess the first thing I would think of is like maybe at least by contrast, if you had a sibling, during your development, during your growth, as you're growing up with them, it would be a lot of getting along, a lot of settling in between, a lot of compromises, finding what works for both, right? Both sides of the party. But like being on your own, you definitely get more of a chance to find your own preferences and find your own peaks, the way you prefer everything and what brings you to your best self, I guess. Your best feeling, your best day. But yeah, so like you definitely, maybe like to some kids, maybe that may be like an overshot if they get too much attention and too much catering from their parents. So it becomes like, as I guess some of these websites put it that I've seen, little emperor syndrome. As in you need to dominate the situation. This has to be under your control. And I wonder if this like leads to, I guess, some only children having like a control freak nature.
Well, we talked about this just like minutes ago before we started recording, about which do you prefer, or which did you prefer in school, independent projects or group projects? And we both said independent projects because I want that fucking control. I don't trust anyone else to get this done the way I can get it done, and she's gonna be late and he doesn't care, so you know what, I'm gonna have to end up pulling ass anyways. So it's just like, I might as well do it by myself and get it in early.
Yeah.
Because also they say only children are overachievers.
Of course.
Because our first friends are adults, and we spend most of our time around adults. So of course we're going to be teacher pleasers as well.
Yeah. Yeah. With the fact that you being an only child, I feel like you get very comfortable with your parents, right? And typically you tend to become good friends with them. Being an only child, like you tend to find what your parents really like, as opposed to having spent that time with a sibling instead. You spend that time with your parents.
Yeah.
And you feel like you get on their level, and then, perhaps they get on your level too, right? They may try to kind of like get into your hobby sometimes and kind of like bond with you, much more, I guess.
Sometimes try to get real into your hobbies and your life.
Yeah, so there is a certain level of that, that's friendly and another side of it that may be overbearing, right? So, but at least like if you're having a close bond with parents, you seem like you're maybe on their level, and if they talk like your friend and they act like your friend, for the only child, they may think like, well, I guess we are kind of like just equal footing. I am an adult, but I think the reality is that like the kids will come to a conclusion at one point or another, or they'll hit an obstacle where they realize, okay, well, this is still my mom or dad, and they still have responsibilities over me, right, to take care of me and everything else. So, but yeah, like it's just that they don't. It's easier to blur that line sometimes, and especially having been through that kind of like situation, I can, I guess, maybe speak from a little bit of personal experience. It's just that, if you see yourself as the adult, sometimes when you're hanging out with other people or other kids, it would just seem like there's a contrast of maturity in a way. Not that you are more mature or less mature or anything, not to insinuate any of that, but rather that you would see yourself as wanting to be more mature. You would aspire to be perhaps more of an adult, right? And the thing is, I feel like that's maybe another responsibility of the parents to remind, like, an only child that it's okay to kind of like have like a bit of a childhood.
Well, I think that contrary to that, actually, maybe not contrary, but when I was a child growing up, I sometimes would feel like certain things my peers did were childish because I always got these lessons from my parents and I was always in communicate with my parents. I think one difference between us is that my parents have about 20 years on your parents. So I was not just an only child, I was an only child with older parents. My parents were 38 and 40 when I was born. That's pretty old.
Wait, that's interesting too. How has that affected you in terms of you growing up versus me in terms of my growing up? I was definitely
Your mom was still growing up when you were growing up.
That's right.
My parents,
she was trying to figure out her own
age.
shit. She had no idea where she was going, possibly, and just trying to find her place in the world.
Yeah.
Wow, your parents were probably
settled.
Just like,
prepared.
This is what we want to do.
This is kid time.
We have some future, some dreams of our own, time to kind of like create this world for us, and then give our daughter something special, like.
Yeah, I think growing up not only as an only child, but with parents who were older than all my friends' parents, sometimes that factor of feeling like your peers are a little bit immature.
Oh my gosh, you would have
very
taken
much
that
true. Just because the advice I was getting from my parents was perhaps, this is generalization, but perhaps not older and wiser than advice other children were getting from their parents, who were at least 10 years my parents' juniors.
Oh, so you were noticing a difference of opinions, right? From like in terms of what people were learning.
Maybe that, but maybe not even that. Maybe it's just that, because not only was I getting more attention from being an only child, but also having older parents. My parents had just more lived experience, so they could give more advice on, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think you should do that. Here's why. But my parents also gave me total freedom. Because I made everything they said not to do, I made all those mistakes. And at the end of it, I learned that they were right. Did you ever feel like because you didn't have an older sibling that you were a bit behind? Like, so we were just talking about feeling like you're more mature than your peers, but did you ever feel a bit behind in terms of learning things about like sex or swear words or things like that? Because you didn't have that older brother or sister to be like, hey, you're too young to know this, but here it is.
That is one thing that I've always kind of like envisioned when I was growing up. It's just kind of having an older sibling. It was an envy of mine, really, to have to see myself, hypothetically in that situation, to have somebody older than me that could take me somewhere and teach me something and show me new things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But being an only child, you kind of develop your own sense of exploration and your system of learning, right? Yeah.
Another thing that people think about only children is that they are unable to ask for help. What do you think about that?
Um, Unable to ask for help. I think that kind of stems from the fact that if we wanted to do something, we have that outlook that if we wanted to do something, do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Because if you ask for help, there's that chance of that help not coming through and not coming out the way you want it to. Because you may have a very particular preference for how something needs to produce a result that only you're looking for it, and other people might not understand the significance of that.
Yeah.
And
I would say for myself as well, this is the one point that I am struggling with, is knowing that it's okay to ask for help, and it's not a failure like for you to have to ask. Especially I'm a baker and I'm working in a bakery. When my boss, isn't around, and usually they aren't around. A good boss is not around. They're behind the scenes organizing everything. Then maybe we don't have an ingredient that I need for something, or I've never made this recipe before and there's no instructions. I usually feel that it's upon myself to just buckle down and figure it out. But from past experiences of making mistakes, my boss has always said, you should have just called me. You should have just asked for help. It's okay. Yeah. Of course you don't know what to do. It's your first time to do this.
It's a foreign feeling, right? Like to know that you can ask for help.
Yeah.
It's like you never considered it an option. You just kind of like, okay, well, how do I do this? How do I do this in your head until, I don't know, however long it takes for you to get there.
Yeah, that's what you figure a good work ethic is.
I think part of that is also like what gave me personally the kind of experience and the kind of outlook that you go out there and you try and fail as many times as you need to, but you improve upon your failures each time until you get there. So like I think being an only child, because you don't have like that older sibling as an example to
or younger
to beat the path for you, you kind of literally have to be used to the fact that you will fail. You're gonna run into some of these obstacles, and sometimes you're not gonna be able to make it through, and you're gonna learn why. And that's gonna happen frequently.
And that's a hard lesson to learn, because apparently only children are more sensitive than children with siblings. Apparently, because we don't have siblings to tease us and make us feel insecure all the time.
Yeah, like having a sibling maybe conditions that into you a little bit, right? But being an only child, you have like your sense of like perfection, which is another topic for only children, but perfection, and you want to achieve it, and there's not that other voice beside you to tell you like, hey, that's kind of a funny idea, why would you do that?
Well, actually, I was gonna say the thing about not being able to ask for help is because if I needed help, my mom would just swoop in. My mom would just not teach me how to do it, she would just do it. Oh, you don't want to make that phone call? I'll do the phone call. Oh, you got a hole there, I know you kind of know how to use a sewing machine, but I'll just sew it. I'll just do it. I'll do this. Don't touch the washing machine. I know how to do the laundry. I'll do the laundry. So I think my mom wasn't an only child, but she was expected to perform like one, to do everything. That's just also because of the time she was born, and because of gender roles, and because of being a post-war baby and all of that. You're just expected to do everything. I
almost wish I could see your uncle when he was like younger, because all I see...
Slim. He was slim.
All I see from the side of your family is just your family making jokes and just poking at him all the time. And like, I'm thinking to myself like, he probably had his glory moments too. Like when he was younger, like he must have been like probably amazing at what he was doing. And
pigeon racing.
He probably had a good like career too, but all it is these days is just like ludicrous notions. Like people are just poking at each other nonstop, and just like This is all I know about this guy. Like,
Because they're
it's
all
such a
retired and they
joke.
all live together. My parents and my uncle are all retired. They all live together. So in order to not kill each other, you have to poke fun at each other. Just
Yeah.
poke it a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Retired.
So, what shall we finish off with here? Let's do one more question.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay. So, I know that it may seem like only children are really, really good friends with their parents, and that's true. And maybe in some cases the children become too dependent on the parents because of being spoiled. But what do you think? Is that the case, or do you find that as you get older you have to wean your parents off of you more than you weaning yourself off of your parents?
I honestly feel like I've never been that dependent, and rather just have that freedom, because early in my childhood, my parents were just not around all that much because they were always away on like business, and I was only living with my mom, so she was just trying to make a living for the family. So it was me and my grandma definitely had her own hobbies. Being like a much older senior, she wasn't really, I guess, she couldn't do much of the stuff that I was doing myself, and I couldn't expect her to do with me. And yeah, I just rather be with my friends. So I could spend all day out there on my own, and it could be nighttime. I could just sleep over, and I may even forget to call my family. But of course, being the only child, my mom would always be the one to ring me back.
So do you feel like you are weaning her off of you more?
I have always felt like I was beating her off of me. That's maybe that's just a story of my life, but I don't know about you.
I think
How about
growing
yourself?
up I depended on my parents a lot, especially my mom, because she did so much for me.
Yeah.
But now I definitely need to wean them off of me. Now that I've become an adult and we've become good friends, you know. Since I moved back to this side of the world.
Yeah. It's
But it's also more of that I do want to hang out with them more than I did even 5 years ago. 5 years ago I was like, get me out of here. Now I'm like, I want to go see my parents. I want to hang out with them. But yeah.
So yeah, I think the part of that is like the only child thing, but another side of it is like the coming of age for a lot of people in general, right? They have a period where they wanna be independent.
You need to tell them hard line.
Yeah.
This is where you are. This is where I'm going.
Just as like a young adult, you want that separation for a while until you get older and realize like you really love your parents too.
But you need
Somehow.
to break free. If you never break free, then that's honestly, in my opinion, where you get what people quote unquote say, maladjusted, socially awkward people who never have their jump of freedom and
never
not that
wanted
there's
to.
anything
I don't
wrong
know.
with being 35 and never having done it. It's just you never have gotten the chance to develop your personality without your parents, parental guidance or whatever.
Yeah, I think we could even just say it as a personal opinion here. I think, to me, personal opinion is that you need that period in your life when you're striking out there.
That's
on
not
your
even
own.
like our random opinion. Like, it's been like that for years and years and years, like centuries. Like, they used to send, because women weren't allowed to do anything, they used to send young men, you go to school and then you go explore the world, because that's what you do when you're a young man. You go explore the world and you find new ideas and you shape your mind.
Yeah, that was a pretty heavy fish.
That fish wasn't flipped. That fish was fucking chucked across the room.
It
was an only
spinning.
fish.
It was spinning, man. This fish was going in many different directions, and it was spinning
Pick the
whole
bones
time.
clean.
Yeah. I don't know. There may be a more in-depth look in this. I feel there's still some things that I don't feel like we've covered yet, but I think we will probably come back to it at another point in time, in another part 2, if you will.
Not even maybe just only children, but I'm also interested in looking at the stereotypes that we have about siblings: eldest sibling, middle sibling, which gets a lot of really random shit, and the youngest sibling.
Yeah.
I'd like to look at those stereotypes too and get some people with siblings on.
Yeah. Yeah, once this COVID thing blows. Or maybe we'll get a Zoom thing going.
Yeah, none of my friends
We'll
have
see.
nice microphones.
All right. Well, hopefully sometime soon then at least. All right. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. This has been Richard and Jenny in the Fish Flip podcast.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye for now.